and welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson and I'm your host. I'm the owner and founder of Wilkinson Accounting Solutions, and I started the podcast off the back of the work we do in M&A because I realised there was a gap in the market with people truly really understanding financial statements, and obviously there's a lot of failed business exits in the UK. So this podcast is here to help entrepreneurs, investors and business owners look at key things they need for exit planning and succession and acquisitions. So I'm really pleased today to have Paula Wingate with us. Hi, Paula.
Hello, Julie. Thank you for asking me to come on to this amazing podcast. I've been excited all week.
No, thanks for coming on. Just a bit of background about Paula, because I always like to explain a little bit about why I like the guest to come on. So Paula is a seven-figure business coach. She focuses a lot around exit and succession planning. And I've had a few conversations with Paula offline. And I think one of the key concepts we're going to get out of today is what really happens in tragic situations when people haven't put an exit or succession plan in for their exit. Because Paula's got a lot of last minute stories where there's a lot of tragic situations happening in businesses. And I think it can sometimes really hit home to people to think, actually, sometimes it feels so far off, but it could happen to anyone. So I think it's going to be a really important topic today. So first of all, Paul, I just want to thank you for coming on and hand over to you a bit about yourself and why you wanted to come on the podcast.
Yeah, so I'm excited to do this because this gives me a great opportunity to be able to spread my message to the world about prepping your business for exit or succession, so that if anything really happens to you, you can actually got a strategy straight away to invoke it. So, and one of the things I wanted to share with you is a real life story that happened in COVID time, 2020, where I was working with a 7-figure business owner. She'd been brilliant, everything. She'd been working 100 hours a week, and ended up going on holiday just outside of COVID. So, you know, at that time where you can run to Dubai and have that time away, she went on the 23rd of December. And by the 24th of December, she's in hospital, 50-50 chance of living, all because her body relaxed after doing 100 hours a week for like at least 3 years with no break, which really put her empire into absolute high risk, because she's now in intensive care, 50-50 whether she's going to die or live. But no will was done, no power of attorney was done, no business trust was done, no personal trust was done, which meant she also had a business partner. And if she had died, then half of her business goes to her next of kin, which was her children that she hasn't seen for ages. So that means the 7-year-old and the 10-year-old would be business partners to her other business partner that they've got no relationship with the kids, if that makes sense. So it was quite shocking, but she ended up, after she survived that section, but later on in the year, she got diagnosed with brain cancer. And we thought, she's fine, no problem. She had an operation, she was going to live, etc. By the way, she's still not done a will, still not done a power of attorney or business, not done anything like that, thinking she's going to be fine. And because of the lack of treatment at that time for people that were experiencing cancer, she never got the right treatment and she died. She died within like 6 weeks.
Oh my goodness. But just go back to that beginning about when she went on this holiday. So I'm interested to know, so she'd worked this 100 hours a week and she hadn't been on holiday for quite a few years. I'm just interested to know then, how did she in the end manage to go on a holiday? Is that something that you had worked with her on? Like, what made her suddenly realise she could do a holiday?
So, yeah, take a step back. She asked me to help her in 2019 to get her business working without her, because her mindset is, my business will never work without me. Now, she had 2 children, and this lady was running back and forth, getting the kids to school and the clubs, etc. So she was always on the run. And when we started working together, we started to show her what little changes she can make that would make a huge difference. So she started to get to work 40 hours a week rather than the 100 hours a week that she's doing. She started to celebrate her 50th birthday. In fact, she went away for her 50th before COVID happened. Everything was brilliant. And then when COVID happened, she felt like she felt stuck. She wanted to get out and take a holiday. She forced herself to have a second holiday after she realized she can work 40 hours a week, which was brilliant. And that was the time. Now I said to her, look, when she got the brain cancer, I says, look, I'll run your business so you can get the treatment you deserve and the rest. And she said this one thing that really, really stood with me. And I thought, my God, it's not just words. It means a lot. She says, Paula, I always said my business never works without me. But actually, it does work without me. I needed cancer. I needed brain cancer to show me that it did. And I was like, whoa, mindset-wise there. Her brain was never trained for her to have a business that worked without her.
Yeah, I mean, that's sad, isn't it? So, yeah. You worked with her to get from this 100-hour week to 40 because, it's obviously the tragic bit at the end is we're going to get to that. But I think just for people, a lot of people that listen to the show are just business owners or feeling they're working a lot of hours and maybe not getting their time. What type of things did she do to go from 100 to 40 hours?
Yeah, so basically we created a clarity roadmap as to how many hours does she need to work in the business. Now, in her head, she was working 100 hours because she has to. But actually, she only had to work 22 hours a week at the most in her business, because at the minute, she's not got a mindset for on her business. And we did the 80-20 rule, where is what's the top 20% of tasks that bring in 80% of your revenue? Now, because she was so tired working this level of work every week, the tasks she was doing was slower. Then she'd make wrong decisions. Then the ripple effect from the wrong decisions would create more work. And before you know it, she's going around this circle. So just getting her to stop and pause and get her out of the business and look at how her business was running, she instantly saw the top 5 tasks that would bring her 80% in. Now, not only that, we worked on the ABC model, which is look at the tasks that make you money. So the A is tasks that make you money, B, tasks that may make you money, and C, the tasks that don't make you any money. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we just prioritize those A tasks in your diary. And then the B tasks and C tasks would be systemized, processed, outsourced, delegated, whatever we needed to do for those two, to make sure that she was sharp. Now, if you think of a business athlete, as an athlete, they only compete 5% of the time, but they'll be training, recharging, learning, defining the skills for 95% of the time. But as business owners, we actually 100% in competition all the time. And it's impossible to be performing at that level. So we also then looked at nutrition. We also looked at the way she thinks, mindset, the learnings. So she went from 20 minutes a day learning to 3 hours a day learning to get her to learn. Because the more you learn, the more you earn. And that's the top 3 things we did that got her to where she needed to be, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Oh, brilliant. So because just that impact so she's now cut her time down, she goes on this holiday. I mean, just stopping to listening that she's then got to intensive care because her body shut down. I mean, this is a serious problem. And what I think is probably a situation for at least 60 or 70 business owners I speak to. Everybody's just running around busy, working all the time. So to hear, that this has actually happened to someone that's, slowed down a little bit, because I know it's happened to me, not so serious, because I don't think I ever worked as much as that. I've obviously gone through a bit of a wellbeing journey the last 18 months, and I do a lot of meditation and journaling now, but it took me... I went to Jamaica the other year, so it would have been Jan 23, and that holiday was what made me realise I wasn't necessarily working 100 hours, but I wasn't always utilising or being present like when I was there. And I know that when I went on that holiday, I got ill actually on the holiday, not as severe as intensive care, but it is when you relax in your body. Now I find, since I've been doing all my wellbeing, I never really got ill anyway, but I have a lot more spare time now in general than I used to. So I think I relax a lot more because I do a lot of yoga, I do a lot of meditation, I do a lot of walking and things like that as well. So it definitely impacts, but that's a big thing, isn't it, to go into intensive care?
Yeah. Oh, big time. And I think every one of us has to experience burnout to then learn how to then be productive, if that makes sense. So when you're starting your business or you're growing your business, you will be running around like a busy fool, I'll say. So we forget about our success health. We forget about our fitness health. We forget about our health being the number one wealth. So for this lady, sometimes you've got to get that slap in the face with the mirror to say, is this worth it? Now, at the time, she was a multiple 7-figure business owner. Her net profit, though, was 3%.
Yeah. So not reaping the rewards for all the effort, basically.
Yeah, so she's putting 97% of their money down the toilet. And her thought process is, it's got to get more sales in, got to get more sales in. My thought process is, stop sales, sharpen your foundation. Sharpen, your profitable foundation so that when you bring more sales in, you're bringing it on a solid foundation, not a blancmange. And as soon as she got that experience, straight away she was like, right, things have got to change. Things have got to stop. And that's when she decided to start reducing the hours.
Yeah. And you do, and you have to. I mean, I know I've done it in my business. So I've had sort of Wilkinson Accounting Solutions maybe 4.5 years now. The first 2 years, I basically just did consulting. I did have a few like tax and bookkeeping clients, but I went out to market and I did a lot of consultancy because I did about 15 different CFO placements or financial or consultancy placements, whatever you want to call it, to learn the market and to see like what did I think that SME businesses needed in their finance department. So I did the first 2 years, and when I made a decision, that's when I started to hire most of my team. But I actually started with a senior role. So I took quite a big risk because I hired a group CFO as the first main employee. Well, I didn't really have all the work, but that's because I knew we basically had to transition our business model from not only to be consulting to also have retainer clients. And we actually did that by an acquisition. So when we transitioned our business with an acquisition, that's what brought us the base, we did over 100 clients in this acquisition to allow us the business model that could allow us to offer the services we needed to clients, because we didn't have all of those services in the business. And I thought it's going to be too slow. Well, it doesn't matter. For me, it was going to be too slow to do it organically. Then once we did the acquisition, we actually slowed down the consultancy so that we could bring on the acquisition successfully because it was overstaffed effectively. Well, not just overstaffed, it was the business we bought the assets, not the sale, but it wasn't, in my opinion, fully running efficiently. Like clients weren't on QuickBooks. So we had to transition it over. We had to sort of streamline the processes, help the clients get more visibility and automation. And then, and that obviously took loads of time. And we're about 18 months into that now. And we have now seen we've got over 50% of the clients onto systems. So that's obviously helping them. We've reconciled everything and talked to the clients all about their accounts. And now it allows us to grow. So a bit like what you're saying, we did that journey, and we're still going through that journey now. But sometimes you do have to just accept that you have to stop a little bit of what you're doing to stabilize what you've already got.
Yeah, absolutely. It's consolidating, isn't it? What was your biggest learning through all that experience, Julie?
Well, it was hard because within about 12 months, maybe even sooner than that, maybe within about 9 months, we brought on 7 staff, an offshore team, 100 clients, all virtually. And some of those staff obviously came from the other business. And we didn't have a lot of those clients. It was a lot of new services. It wasn't new to not in terms of our skill set, but in terms of the infrastructure of what we were offering, we had to build. So that there was a big learning curve because it was a risk. Because when we bought the business, it was a business that what we were told is it was quite, their relationships with the clients. And so we took a bit of a risk because we were like, but we didn't feel that these clients were being serviced as well as they could be in terms of, their visibility of the accounts, the speed of it, of knowing when they had to pay their tax bill, things like that. And that's ultimately our mission. Our mission isn't just to make the money. I am on a mission to help 500 business owners become more financially literate. So we had to go through that journey. So to get that, we had to have a lot of conversations, a lot of explaining about why it can benefit. And actually it's been successful because, where they used to visit everybody in person, when we sort of bought it, it was sort of like, well, everybody likes the fact that we go in person. But actually, when we had those conversations with people, the fact that we do see some of them in person, it's not like we wouldn't see them in person, but people realise you can do things remotely now. And we get the same benefit, if not actually more, because we can give more guidance now that people are on systems and things like that. So I think it was just, there's been so many learnings from the journey, but because we did a lot of things very quickly and we didn't have the business, but we just had to implement it and do it. And the team have been amazing. And so have the clients, to be honest, because it was been a big change for everybody. But I feel like it's really settled and gone really well in the grand scheme of things, considering what we had to do in 9 months.
Totally get it, because you're under quite a lot of challenge there. So, if you did it again, what's the one thing what's the 1% you would do differently that would make a massive difference? I love it how you're interviewing
me, Paula. It's brilliant.
I know. How's that even happen?
It's like we've done role reversal. There has been some learnings in terms of probably the speed in maybe that we could have got people on to systems a bit earlier and streamline some of the processes a bit quicker. I think if we did it again, we'd be able to do things a lot quicker. But because some of the things we didn't have in place, so for instance, we have an offshore team now that does help us with some of our back end. We didn't have that when we did the acquisition. That wasn't in place. We had to bring that on board. So they obviously had to become part of our team and learn our staff. So obviously we're a lot more set up than we was because some of the infrastructure wasn't there. So you could say that was a learning. I mean, perhaps we could have brought them on before the acquisition, but now we've had the learnings from that. We'd be in a different place when we do it again because we'd be able to do it quicker because we already kind of know we have the systems and processes and that there in place.
Wow.
So that was probably it. And I won't lie, it is a cash flow constraint to any business because we had to cut we've had to cut the overhead, streamline things, pay off the deferral. So we're not different to any other business that does an acquisition. So, but we can do it because we have our cash flow. Which I always talk about on LinkedIn. So we're all over our cash. We have a 60-week cash flow every single week. We review it literally supplier by supplier. And we look at like where can we get payment terms, where can we phase things, where can we manage things, to get everything covered and to keep growing, because now we're at a position where we can actually absorb more clients into our current cost base. And obviously our goal now is because I want to help my 500 businesses. I think we've done about 150 at the minute. So, we just want to keep growing, do more acquisitions, but also look for organic clients, that want more accounting support and become financially literate, basically, or more educated on their accounts, should I say.
Yeah, because, it's really surprising how many business owners don't trust themselves with numbers. So they know the answer, but they'll never look at the numbers, if that makes sense. So when I'm doing exit planning, succession planning, or even acquisition planning, one of the things we say is like, what is your daily income target? And they'll look at me and not even think. And these are 7-figure business owners as well as 6 and 5. And they'll say, right, what's your weekly target? What's your monthly target? Even net profit or your cost of sales, etc. And people scared of numbers, and that's why I feel they don't even ask themselves, because they're trying to avoid it. And if it can just get to know, so I used to hate numbers myself, but I just sat down and just figured it out. Now, just nice every day, really slow. I started to get addicted to learning about the turnover. Like, what's your best record day? But how do I increase that by 1%? Before you know it, you've gone from, say, 100 grand a month to 150 grand a month, and it's been one tactic that's done it.
Yeah.
But they don't write down the tactic that's done it. And it's like, that could be the tactic that could multiply it again by 2 or 3 times, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I mean, and also bringing on the right advisors, because I believe, so when people are looking to exit, I mean, I always talk about the 3 different types of business owners, you know, the owner operator who does everything, the board member that doesn't really do the day-to-day but makes strategic decisions, and then the silent investor, where effectively that's where I would say if you want to maximize the value and exit, we should be looking to get to. The silent investor is a bit like more of a corporate mindset, where the business kind of runs fully without you. You have a leadership team that are making all the decisions. And I think there's a big difference between having processes in place and having an automated business when you're still involved as the owner, to having that in place when you're not involved. Because you can have, because the processes, it's not necessarily the process that changes, but it's the risk of error and fraud in that process when people are doing it. And that's where we come into corporate governance, because, you know, for example, you can automate your sales process and you can automate your purchasing process, and perhaps the owner is still making the payment runs. But if that owner isn't going to make that payment run anymore, and they give that responsibility or accountability to a different person, from that owner's perspective, what is the risk of something going wrong? Well, the biggest risk is they pay the wrong amount, they pay things that aren't due, and they pay it at the wrong time, and no one manages the cash flow, because perhaps the owner goes into the bank and does the cash flow every week. But when the owner's not involved, who does the cash flow? So who says, right, this is my payment run for this week, and this is my 16-week cash flow? And that's what I see the biggest problems is. So people go on stages in their journey, they become fearful of the numbers, but then they probably build their own cash flow and they build their own budget. But if you're, as the owner, you're not going to be there, you shouldn't be the one building the budget. It should be your teams building the budget. And that's a completely different process to you building the budget, because you're very close to the business, so you can build the budget. But if you don't want to be there, then how do you get other people to do it for you? And that's why people need the right advisors, because if you have the right advisors on board, you don't need to be scared of the numbers. Because, like, for instance, if we was going to build an exit pack for someone, we wouldn't really expect them to necessarily, obviously they need to know their business, but we could provide them the reports to tell them the numbers. They just have to act on those decisions. But what happens is people try and they say to things like, well, I want to do it because I want to be involved in it and I want to know it's right. And actually that's probably more risky than getting the skilled person to do it, because when they're trying to do it themselves, it's often wrong. And I think having poor data is worse than having no data.
Yeah. Now, what you've just said there instigated a story that's happening with one of my clients at the minute. And it's about their reluctance to pay for the right people, the right level of people to help them run the business. And it's got them to a point where they've been forced into insolvency over a 15K VAT bill, all because the owner did not want to seek legal advice over it or accountant advice over it, because his head was, I don't owe that VAT bill, I'm not paying it. And his accounts are now still frozen. And what's stopping them unfreezing these accounts? So they've got the risk of, they've delisted, it's okay, they've paid the bill, they've come off the insolvency, but they can't come off the list at the sheriff court because there's no admin staff to be able to take that tag off saying they're insolvent. So their business is frozen and the payroll can't be done. The supplier payments can't be done. The client payments can't be done, which means they are a couple of days away from going bust or losing their business. And that's because the reluctance of not paying for the right people to be around them.
Or having the right people and then not having the right culture or the right process is the second thing.
Yeah. I would say they've got the culture okay, but it's the scarcity mindset of, I'm not paying for that when I can pay, say I'm not paying £1,000 for you, Julie, I'll pay £200 for somebody from the Philippines.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It's that mindset, and it's like, that is dangerous.
It is dangerous, and the reason it happens, and people will often say as small business owners, but you've got to remember that the businesses that are 7 figures now was a small business, because everybody started from the start. The small businesses say, I'm too small for reporting. Actually, the biggest issue with all of this is most people price wrong from the start, because especially in service-based business, it's harder in product-based, I think. Our product is harder to cost and manage because there can be so many components involved. But on a service-based business, a lot of people, that might be making six figures, maybe they're at 100 grand or 200 grand a year, sort of thing, sort of that sort of growth stage. There's often, when you look at their profit, because they will be paying themselves dividends. Let's just say they're at £200,000 a year and they're at a 35,000 profit. I don't know, probably not as high a margin as you want, but I would say it's probably realistic, where a lot of people are. But in that number isn't their salary. So if their net profit doesn't cover their salary and more, they're effectively not really running at a profit, because from an investor mindset, which you are as a business owner, you should be thinking as yourself as an investor. You should be making your salary should be in the profit. And on top of that, you should then make your margin. So if your target's a 30% margin, that 30% margin should be on top of your numbers, which is why when we talk about adjusted EBITDAs, when people come to exit, people should be running adjusted EBITDAs anyway, because the fact that they choose to take dividends because it's tax effective, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with taking the dividends, but there is something wrong with it if when you run your profit figures every month, you're delusional about your profits, because if you forget that you've paid yourself the £2,000 and that's not in your profit number, and you just forget that every month, then actually your profits are overstated because it's not true, because your number. So there's nothing wrong with doing it by dividends. But who makes the adjustments for you and looks at the real profits? That's my thing. And it starts at the beginning, because it starts when people are pricing. They're pricing it to pay themselves. And you shouldn't be pricing it to pay yourself. You should be pricing it to pay yourself plus a margin.
Julie, this is gold. This is absolute gold. And I find people price at the start to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. Not even to create a system or a team to run it with them. So what they end up doing is they'll get to a situation of paying the bills, and because they're so good at what they do, they get stuck in the business, and then they can't get out of it. And then they're like, I dare even increase my prices now because I'm going to lose this momentum I've got. Therefore, I'm going to stick like that for 5-10 years. And what they'll find is that's when they start burning out, and if they pull themselves away, the business will crumble because they've not done the systems, the foundations, processes, the team building, nothing. And all we need is somebody like you, amazing, to say, Julie, sit down, work out what my prices should be. Now, people say my mindset, my self-worth, I might not be worth that. So I helped a lady go from like 1,397 per program to like 13,000. But what stopped her from jumping up to that, because that's what she needed to charge to get what she needed, was a mindset, a self-worth, and a belief in herself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't, and I do understand it's hard, because sometimes you don't know exactly what all your costs are going to be necessarily, which is why you have to plan. So when you say things like budget and forecast, effectively it's just a plan. It's a plan to say, these are my estimated budgets. So this is from the startup perspective. You're a startup, you don't know what your costs will be, so you estimate. You go to the market and you research. Okay, averagely it's £500 a month for a bookkeeper. Averagely it's X amount for a year, to do my accounts. Averagely an admin assistant is this. So you put it all in, because you can work backwards. So that's where you start. Whether it's right or wrong, you can track as you go along, can't you, and change your model. But the thing is, the mindset is a bit of a problem, and the actual accounts, your plans can't change that mindset. But what it can do is it can give you some clarity over, okay, so for me to meet my goal, I need to do this. Maybe in your mind, you don't know how to do that because you think, oh, I can't charge that amount, whatever, but that's irrelevant. You can still build it first and then work on, okay, so how do I deliver it? Because the biggest problem is, and probably I've been a bit guilty of it myself, I think we all have times of it as business owners, because sometimes you're just learning as you go. The biggest problem is knowing if you don't do that, you take on the clients probably that wouldn't pay that amount of money, then you get too busy. Whereas if you plan it initially and go, right, I'm going to go out to market and target these clients, you'll know who to say no to. And I do just think, and one of the things we have to be better at is saying no earlier on in the journey, not just, when you get a bit bigger, it's sometimes a bit easier to say no, because you have more clients and stuff. But you have to realize that taking on the clients at the beginning just to get the money doesn't actually help you in the long run.
In fact, it's suicide, really. And what you're saying here is just world class, Julie, because a lot of people will avoid this conversation because, like, what they say yes to now. So just say they get a client and go, "That'll pay that bill." Yes, they're going to say no to a potential dream client later on.
Yeah.
And that can actually sink the business, or can reduce the value of the business, or it becomes dependable on a certain client, and it stops them growing. If that makes sense. So one of the biggest things I always say is, no matter what size you are, you might disagree with this, but no matter what size you are, get an accountant or a financial director helping you to read the numbers. Make sure you've got the right break-even price, because what you said is right. They create black holes of cash flow going down black holes of, like building up debt in their business, and they're not even understanding the debt because they're not paying themselves when they should be paying themselves. So it's easy to pay a bill, easy to pay an employee first before you, because you can say no to yourself. It's okay, I can cope this month, I can put my living on a Visa card. But it's harder if you flip it to actually, if you pay yourself first, then you start your clients, your employees, and then your bills. It's always harder to say, I ain't got enough money for my bill.
Yeah.
Therefore, your break-even price is going to be right. But no, like when I talk to customers, say, what is your true break-even price? They guess.
Yeah, and they won't know.
And I'm like, no. And that's the power of having somebody you in their business is, right, Julie, can you work out my break-even price? What should it be?
Yeah. And we do that. I mean, I do that in my strategy sessions with people. Like, I help people look at those types of things because I do think people go through journeys, and that's why we don't always go straight in and say, oh, you have to have this CFO for so many days a week, because it can be too expensive for people. Sometimes it's not that complicated. They just need a few hours support to build something so that they can work on it. And that's kind of how we structure the business model. Is we be a bit more sensible about, the pricing for people, because they don't always need 10 months of support. They might just need a few hours to build something to help them on the way. But I think what people have to realize is sometimes the business model has to drop to actually succeed. And I suppose in a way we kind of did that in our business to a point, because for us to get a long-term sustainability of what we felt we needed in the business, we had to accept that, our consultancy made us a lot of money. I mean, I probably got up to nearly 400,000 turnover in a couple of years on consultancy at a really high margin, but that's because I was doing it. If I then say to myself, well, I don't want to do this now, I've decided I want to grow the business for it to have a value for someone else to do it, I can't make that amount of money with that amount of margin for the next couple of years, because I have to now invest to change that business model around. So there's nothing wrong with the profits dropping, the cash flow being a bit harder at times to like invest in that. But the most important thing is, that you track it. Is when people do it and have no idea that it's happening, that becomes the problem, I think, more than when you're tracking it. Because at least if you're tracking it, you can do things about it.
Yeah. And you know what, right? 100% of clients have got exit plans. And this is what you've got me thinking. And 20% of business owners have exit plans. So if they're having to change models, or situation happens in their business where they lose the best client or the best employee, these plans have already got strategies planned out, ready to invoke. If that makes, just like a plane would do if it drops and the oxygen mask comes out. That is part of the exit plan, where business owners will go, oh, that's just happened to me. What do I do? And spend maybe 6 weeks working it out. Or worse, impulsively reacting to it and making it worse.
Yeah.
And it's getting these forecasts and these plans in place. So you just press that button and that strategy works.
Yeah, because the problem is, I always believe that you should be looking at your biggest risk and you should be minimizing that risk. Because when COVID came along, I know nobody knew about COVID, but ultimately a lot of people said, oh, my business failed because of COVID. The reality is you would have to look at that and say, would your business have failed in 5 years anyway without COVID? And I know maybe nobody wants to have that thought to themselves, but you do have to reflect honestly, because in my business, I mean, we have quite a high overhead base on some things that some people might not invest in because they go, I haven't got the money to pay it. But I just look to myself and go, what is my biggest risk in my business and how can I mitigate it? So we're fully cyber accredited, which costs us money. we're fully trademarked, which costs us money. We've got a HR firm that help us, that we're a small business, we've got a HR firm. I've got an IT firm that manage all of our our viruses and our software. They manage all of our emails, so it's all secure. I've got key personnel insurance, so if any of our key business owners, if any of our key and staff go, obviously get ill or leave or whatever, we've got insurance. So you could look at all of those things, and for a small business owner, and that is probably impacting our profits, because you could argue our sales maybe don't reflect at the minute to cover all of those overheads. But the way I see it, but if I don't put that in now, though, what is my biggest risk? If something happened or one of those things, so if we had a cyber hack, for instance, and they stole all of our money, then that could cripple my business, but my small overheads don't cripple my business immediately. Do you know what I mean? It might mean I make a lower profit and I have to manage my things, but once I get more sales, I will apportion those costs over those sales, and eventually it won't become a big cost. And that is where people plan. So people don't risk plan enough, because I think you think the biggest risk and you mitigate that risk, and then you then bring the right people in to continue to oversee that risk.
Yeah, you totally agree. And with the expenses, let me ask you this question. How do you make 3.5 times return from your expenses?
Well, we know our monthly overhead costs and like fixed costs, because like I say, our business is quite a simple business model because it's service based. I think it is more complex if it's products, but on a service based business, you know your overheads, so you effectively know what your retainer income needs to be each month, or perhaps they pay it in quarters or 6 months or whatever they do, but you can average it out so that because where people fall down when they don't bookkeep correctly is they don't keep accurate records. So for an example, let's just say you're a consultancy firm, okay, and you've got 5 staff, okay, and you're on month 1 of the business and you take 5 deposits for new customers, and how you report those deposits. So if you put those deposits as sales, which I think a lot of people do, that month your sales is going to be inflated by 5 customers, but your costs aren't there because nobody's actually worked on those customers yet. So even though you haven't, you may have paid staff to work on prior customers, but if you're actually going to look at it at a project perspective, that you've taken income from 5 customers, yet no costs are actually apportioned to them because no one's delivered the work. That's why deposits go to the balance sheet, not to the P&L, because a deposit isn't actually a sale. Because if you're going to go on the accruals concept, which means you match costs to sales to get true profit, you only report in the P&L when you report all the costs that are associated to that one project. So that is why people can get into a muddle when they don't have accurate bookkeeping, because their margins can be inflated, because one month they could take 5 deposits, so it could go, oh my god, I've made a 40% margin this month, but the next month they don't take 5 deposit and they work on that project and their margins drops to 5%. So then you'd be going, what's your real margin by project? Because they won't know, because the fluctuations in those it's hard to track where you're actually making your monies, and that's why you need more. It is important to have your management accounts and obviously your cash flows, but you do need business understanding alongside that, which is why when people come to do M&A, sellers can't explain their movements, their trends, because they don't know them, because they've had these years of fluctuations, because they've never got bookkept correctly, but had correct bookkeeping and just sorted it out at year end. So when you're looking at trends, they can't explain it.
Yeah, we'd be looking for some business owners to have a financial system in place to prove the result. The results. Like, you wouldn't believe I've had 7-figure businesses going, I've got cash here, Paula, that I can't. My business is worth this, but it's cash I'd collect, so it's not on my annual accounts. And I'm like, what? If you want to sell your business, that needs to be also in. Yeah, but it means I'm declaring it. Well, that then deletes the value of your business. You can't have both sides. And I've had that quite a few times, believe it or not. And I'm like, right, why is the biggest thing I would love to see in business owners is having a financial system that is so robust, they'll be able to answer your questions as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And that's where they need to get the right support financially, because generally systems themselves won't do it. Because you need somebody to push buttons to know, because in that example, let's just say this example where you've got these 5 projects, first of all, somebody needs to know their deposits and they're not sales. And that comes with operations aligning to finance, because the finance person, the bookkeeper, might not know. Who would know? Someone in the operations team, because they're the ones managing the projects. So first of all, you have to have good communication, and then you have to know, well, when does that project complete? When are they expected? Because who puts it into the cash flow? Who knows when is the balance of that going to get paid? Do you know what I mean? So the system, it's very unlikely a system on its own can do it unless you have very good AI. Because if your project, if project scope happens or it delays, you'd obviously have to have very good systems. But someone would have to tell the system these things in the first place. So you need good system, you need good people to do it. And if you are going to do the accruals concept, that doesn't really happen. You have to have the accounting system, but people bring the accounting system in and think, oh, it just replaces people. But that's never the idea of an accounting system. The accounting system is to systemize and make it more accurate, because without systems, there's a lot more risk of error. But it doesn't stop the person needing to still do the job, because you still need to push the buttons to post things to the right place and to know where the journals need to go and to do the month end. So, and I've seen examples. Someone came to us once and said, right, I do a lot of R&D. I want to do an adjusted EBITDA to look at what my business can be worth, because obviously the R&D is cost now, which is for future revenue. So we said, fine, we can have a look at what you spent, help you with adjusted EBITDA. They didn't have any management accounts. They only had the year-end accounts. So we had to use the year-end accounts to do the adjustments. We came to look at the year-end accounts. The accountants had already capitalised the R&D. So the profit numbers that they thought were overstated, it wasn't even in there. So they thought they were going to get an adjustment of about 1.5 million of R&D. So if you round that up to 3 times, 4.5 million in value, and it wasn't even in the P&L, it was already on the balance sheet. So because they didn't know one accounting concept, their business valuation changed by 4.5 million. So this is where they had an accountant and everything was okay. The tax returns were fine. They were signing off the accounts, but the owner wasn't using a financial advisor or a CFO or an accountant a long time to forecast or plan. They were planning themselves, so they wasn't aligned. So they were telling themselves, oh, I can adjust my profits by this 1.5 million, which technically wasn't wrong, but it's because there wasn't that link to that actually know, well, my accountants have already done that adjustment. So if they had a management accounts, they would have been adjusting that, even if for tax reasons it went on for that, that's fine. But your management accounts would be showing your trading, not your tax position, because that's what a management accounts is. A management accounts is your trading position, and then you adjust for tax, not the other way around. You shouldn't be having tax and then adjusting for trading, because it's not often enough. That happens once a year, 6 months after the year end.
I get you. So let me ask you this question then. If you're a startup or a 5, 6, 7 figure business owner, and there's one thing they can do that will help them sell their business at maximum value, what would it be in the financial system?
Well, I'd say, first of all, have the basic bookkeeping, and then start looking at reporting afterwards. Because when we say reporting, we don't necessarily mean 50-page documents of reporting. It basically means you need a P&L, a balance sheet, and you need to understand what's on it, and by month. And then you need to be able to adjust if there's big numbers that are going to start manipulating those numbers. So perhaps when you first start, it's simple, because you don't take deposits and people just pay you on delivery of work. So then it's a bit more simple, isn't it? You're invoicing and it's your sale. You might then change your business model because you want to get more cash up front, which is sensible. But that changes accounting, because the cash coming up front isn't a sale, it's now a deposit. And if you don't know those accounting principles, you shouldn't be doing your bookkeeping. Because because in the beginning, perhaps month 1, month 2, it's simple. But let's say you grow on quite a quick scale and now you have a lot of these different things. You should be getting someone that understands how to do journals, that understands accounting principles to be able to do these adjustments. Is my view. And then you can build from there. That's basic accounting. And then I do think everyone should have a forecast of some form and a business plan, and this project pricing tool that tells them what they need to price at. I think they're the basics. And then you can get into more complicated management reporting later down the line, because I think management reporting more complicated is more useful when you have more staff. So once you start having more senior staff that can help you understand the numbers, then but you might not need really complicated management of reporting when it's just you, as long as you understand your basic P&L and balance sheet. and you're adjusting correctly, your basic P&L and balance sheet should be fine. But once you start getting people that are helping you analyze those numbers and making those decisions, then it needs to be more formal, because you need to have more like a board meeting, don't you, where everyone gets the reports. And because it's more complicated, because more people are involved, the reporting will need to be more complicated because it will start bringing in different departments.
So what you're saying is doing the basics world class then, basically.
Yeah. So anyway, we've had a good session, Paula, and it's been quite interesting because you've been interviewing me, so we've done like a different style podcast.
I know, it's just chatting, wasn't it? It's so interesting what you're saying. Gold dust.
Yeah, it's really, I've never really talked that much about it on the podcast because obviously I'm also doing the other story, so it's been great to like share my thoughts on it as well. But it's been really interesting hearing your facts though on, you know, the issue of this exit and the owner, because I think it's a really important point is you do need the basics in place, but the mindset and being able to then actually apply those is what's going to really bring the benefit long term, because you can have all the numbers you want, but if you can't apply them, then you're never going to get there. And I see that a lot as problems for business owners. So I definitely think it's been really useful. So hope you've enjoyed it.
I've loved it. I've learnt loads on this podcast. So thank you so much, Julia. And what you say there is absolute gold dust for any business owner. So I'd be asking what's the top 3 learnings they've got from this podcast.
All right, top 3 learnings. Let's do it. So, and I just want to say thanks to our listeners. It's been amazing. I launched a new Build and Exit YouTube channel sort of at the beginning of 24 because I never had an official dedicated YouTube channel. It's already had nearly 6,000 views. And obviously we've then got that, and then we've got over the 5,000 download mark as well. So I just want to say to all of our listeners, thank you so much. But if you do love the show, do hit the subscribe button or leave a rating and review, because it helps more people find the channel. Because I get there's a lot more listeners and views than there probably is subscribers at the minute. So it is, you know, I am just reaching out and saying if anyone's watching the channel and you love it, do hit it, because it helps us get more reach. And thank you, Paula, and I will see you again soon.